Welcome to the Night Tube. I'm Stephen Knight, and I'm very pleased to welcome David Silverman. David, how are we doing?
I'm doing fine, Stephen. Thanks for having me on the show. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. It's my pleasure. It's been a while since we were actually in the same room. It was the
Pre-COVID.
yes, when people could interact and you could see your friends and family and touch people and not just sit in the house getting fatter and fatter.
I remember actually you and I sat at the same table and we didn't have masks on or anything.
Nothing. Yeah, that was a good event. So a lot changed for you before that event. A lot's changed for you since. And usually when I start the podcast, I tend to just ask people to tell me about themselves, who they are, what they've done. And I suppose it'd be more fitting to ask you to tell us about who you were and the organisation you were in charge of. In essence, you was more or less the poster boy for all things American atheism for the longest time. So, yeah. Maybe we could talk about how you started in that job, how you started in sort of activism in the secular atheism realm, and what led to your departure from that organisation.
Well, I started as an activist. I'm an activist at heart, right? That's what I do. That's what I am. I want to fix things. And so I started as an activist when I was 30. So that was 1966. And I was volunteering for an organization called American Atheists, which was founded by Madalyn Murray O'Hair back in the 50s. And I worked hard, and it was just, I was a professional inventor at Bell Labs at the time. I didn't have any aspirations to be a professional activist. I just wanted to do things. And what happened was I kept doing things, and American Atheists kept moving me up the ladder. And I didn't ask to be moved up the ladder like almost ever, except for when I ran for president in 2010, which I won. And, that was a bit of a challenge. There was some anti-Semitism to fight on the board back then. But after I became president, it was a really good role. It was a really good run. I was able to use American Atheists to literally change the country. And I can prove that mathematically. And I wrote a book about it. And my book tour hit 7 countries. And I created the largest atheist event in world history, 30,000 people on the Mall of America in Washington, D.C., the Reason Rally 1. And then, but when you have that kind of activity, and I've always been the firebrand. I've always had a strong tongue, and I made my share of enemies. And when those enemies intersected with woke ideology, I was hit with 2 false Me Too allegations. And I was fired from my job with 0 due process. The allegations came down one day. I was fired from my job the next with no due process or anything like that.
And this was in 2018?
This was in 2018.
And these two allegations that you referenced, these are separate from the later allegation from Rebecca Vitsmun,
this is the thing. It's such a story because, every time a person gets accused, they say, "Oh, I'm innocent. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I actually didn't do it." Okay. I had sex with a groupie. I did have sex with her. I had sex with a groupie. She pursued me all day. The assertion that she was too drunk to consent is asinine. But that's what she said 7 years later, only to BuzzFeed, just to get me fired. Okay, I'll say that again. A groupie pursued me all day. Her name is Rose St. Clair. She pursued me all day. I have pictures of us having lunch and dinner together. And we went back to my hotel that night. She was 22, and we had relations. I cheated on my wife, guilty as charged. But then 7 years later, she comes back and tells BuzzFeed that she was actually, let me be specific, because she had a lawyer. So her specific statement was she believed she was too drunk to consent. Because if you believe something, you can't prove that wrong. I learned that when I tried to hire a defamation attorney. She didn't say she was too drunk to consent. She said she believed she was too drunk to consent, which is enough to take my life away, but not enough to sue back.
So, as you've mentioned, you were this huge name in movement atheism. Every time you're at an organization centered around this theme, you're going to get recognized. You'll be practically a rock star in them rooms. I've been in these situations where you're in a room with, say, Richard Dawkins or someone like that, and people do gravitate towards you. People look up to you almost as a celebrity in that sense. Can you honestly say this this aura you had at the time was never leveraged to coerce or apply pressure? Because I suppose there is a difficult line to prove between coercion and consent.
I can say it without any hesitation. I've never coerced or pushed anyone. Okay, right. I am the opposite of that. I'm the opposite of that. And without getting into too much detail, there are lots of people who can back me up on that. I'm not the person who says, "Hey, fuck me and I'll get you something." I'm the exact opposite of that person. In fact, when Rose wanted to get a job from me before we had sex, I told her no. I told her it would never happen. But she actually changed that wording around for the BuzzFeed report. Anyways, I don't want to get too into this because I'll give you the stats, but I want you to understand that I'm really emotional about it. Okay.
Sure. I understand.
And it really fucked me up. And it's hard for me to maintain my cool when I talk about this. I'm doing it right now, but it's hard for me to maintain my cool because these two people and the people that they worked with really, really damaged me, and it's fucked up. The other person who made a report was Beth Presswood, aka Rachel Lomelli. She's a teacher at a college down in Houston, and she and I were friends. She and I were friends for years, and we flirted all night long in front of all sorts of witnesses. And her husband told her not to fuck me. Her husband is Matt Dillahunty. Matt Dillahunty is a lying piece of shit.
Wow.
Matt Dillahunty's a bad guy, Stephen. He's a bad guy.
I have to say, I've met Matt. I've interviewed him. I've had nothing but positive experiences with him. Of late, I've had some ideological differences on Twitter, but I don't know him personally, and obviously he's not here to defend himself, so I'm not sure how best to respond to that.
Right. He'll never defend himself. He'll just throw shit at me and say that I've done bad things that nobody knows about.
So you assume this must be personal because of the link to his wife?
Yeah, it's absolutely personal. Okay, he told his wife not to have sex with me. They had a poly relationship, and
I just explain what that means to anyone who's not sure. It seems like a very American.
They have sex with other people.
Right.
They were a relationship that were essentially an open marriage, but there was a veto in that open marriage, and Matt Dillahunty vetoed Beth playing with me, but in front of many, many other witnesses, she played with me anyways, and she played. Matt called while we were playing. She left to go take his call. Then she came back to have sex with me. Okay. Then she went to Matt and told her that I assaulted her.
How long after
So here's the thing. And here's why I want you to understand the time thing here. Okay. Because when I say Matt Dillahunty's a bad guy, I want you to understand how bad he is. Okay. This happened in 2015. She told her husband, apparently, the next day or that night that I assaulted her. They told a bunch of people, progressive lefts who believe all women, that I assaulted her. Then, 2 years later, now let me ask you something, Stephen. Are you married?
No. I have a long-term partner.
Okay. So let's say I sexually assaulted your long-term partner.
Right.
Let's say I got your partner in a room, and I pushed her against the wall, and I grabbed her tits really hard, so hard that I left black and blue marks on them. She said, no. And I said, you're not allowed to say no to me. And I slapped her across the face. Then she pushed me away and ran out the room, came to you crying, okay? Tears streaming down her face. And so you and she call the rape crisis hotline together to get her over the experience. And then 2 years later, I sit down in a room with you and I say, hey, Stephen, how are you and me? How are we together as friends? What are you going to say?
Well, I'd obviously want to do some serious physical damage to you at the first possible opportunity. I mean, I'm not saying that's the correct response by any means, but certainly that would be my first emotion.
Right.
For sure.
I think that would be mine too. I mean, I was married for 28 years and I have a beautiful girlfriend now. I think if somebody assaulted either one of them, I mean, even if you assaulted my ex-wife now, I still have fondness for her. I still have love for her. Even if you assaulted my ex-wife, like I allegedly assaulted Beth Presswood / Rachel Lomelli, we're not going to be friends. So how about if I sat you in a room 2 years later after I sexually assaulted your partner that way, and you said to me, hey, Dave, you know what? It's water under the bridge. It's all good. There are some people that I won't get on stage with, but you're not one of them. Dan Arrow's a bad guy. He's a communist. He says bad things to me on the internet. I won't get on stage with him. But you, I'll get on stage with you. And I'll tell you what, I did get on stage with you 2 years later, and we had a thing together on stage. How does that fit with me pushing your partner against the wall, making her cry, and calling the rape crisis hotline?
Yeah, I agree. If that's as it happened, that is very strange. It does call into question the specifics. Okay.
Would you like to hear the recording?
So I agree, and I obviously I'm assuming have you released this recording already?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's out there for people to listen to and make up their own minds. I'm just very conscious that Matt's not here. I don't necessarily feel the need to defend him on a personal level. I'm just very conscious that we're talking about somebody who
these are bad people. And Matt Dillahunty's a powerful guy in the atheist movement still. People aren't realizing what a piece of shit he is yet. I'm one of the very few people who've seen it, and a lot of people are. But this isn't about Matt Dillahunty being a piece of shit. This is about the movement itself.
Right. Okay. Well, just to take it back a little bit. So these two complaints, was it both these complaints released at the same time, which led to your suspension in 2018? So was
almost as if they were coordinated by Nick Fish.
Right. Okay. So I think we'll get on to. Nick Fish he's the guy who's running American Atheists now, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the guy who said to the board that I had broken the New Jersey whistleblower statute, which is a completely bullshit statement. He's the person who lied to the board that I had done something wrong.
Did any of these...
at the exact same time that the BuzzFeed article was coming out?
Did any of these complaints from these aggrieved women ever make it to any sort of legal authority, to the police, any
BuzzFeed,
courts?
And that's it. BuzzFeed, and that's all.
Okay, so presumably there was an internal investigation within American Atheists, and how was that concluded? And was it diligent enough in your view?
They did a full financial audit just to make sure I wasn't stealing any money. Newsflash, I didn't steal any money.
Oh, yes, because there were some allegations that you'd misappropriated funds towards some of your
anything they could get, and they were trying anything,
right,
to say that we're not firing Dave because of the baseless allegations with no due process. But that's exactly what they did. There's no financial impropriety. I have it in writing again from another board member that says that the financial audit came back clean. And in the end, they fired me because, whatever reason they think they fired me, but they didn't give me any sort of due process, and they didn't give me and I didn't deserve to be fired. Okay. I didn't break policy. I didn't deserve to be fired, but that's not the point. Okay. I don't want this to get into a bitching session, which it already is. And I don't want it to be that. Okay. Because I will bitch and bitch and bitch, but I don't want to do that. I want to talk about the implications. Okay.
Okay.
The implications, when you're talking about a movement that's based in skepticism, the implications of an organization, the hardline organization, forcing out its successful leader based on no data because of accusation alone, and proudly stating that there was no due process, proudly stating that I didn't deserve due process, I didn't need due process, even though due process was in the written policies at American Atheists.
Well, let's just look at it from a PR perspective for a moment. Let's say you're in a position and you have a Dave Silverman, who's the president of your organization, with accusations leveled at him the way they were, and you have to make a decision. Just from a PR perspective, somebody who's the president of your organization, whether true or untrue, has had accusations of sexual misconduct fired at him, sexual abuse, things like that. You have to make a decision. There's all this attention on you. What is the correct move? What is due process in that situation? And I appreciate this will be difficult for you to sort of step back and look at it objectively, given you were completely in the middle of it.
Actually, super easy, barely an inconvenience, because AAI did it too, right? After I went to AAI, after I was fired from American Atheists, Atheist Alliance International did the research, did the work that American Atheists didn't do, fuck you, and realized that it was a bullshit thing. And they hired me on as executive director. And then Rebecca Vitsmun came out.
Now, that's fascinating to me, because this is a very interesting case study in I mean, so a lot of these allegations, it typically tends to be often a case of he said, she said, and it's very difficult to know what is the right response. And honestly, I'll be hand on heart, completely honestly, we've been in a room a few times at different events. This latest one was when you took up your new job. I think it was just before the Rebecca Vitsmun thing came out. And I was a little bit concerned about sitting next to you in case, just a little moment, it came over my head. What if somebody gets a photograph of us together and then there's this guilt by association? But then I felt bad for thinking like that about somebody I've got no way of corroborating anything that's been said. And it seems to me that no matter what the outcome is, no matter whether you can prove your innocence, you will always be tarnished and tainted in that way in the eyes of a lot of people in the public realm. And I mean, are you finding... in person, let's forget the cesspit that is the internet, but in person and personal interactions, are you finding people are more sympathetic to your plight, or are you finding more hostility?
I'm finding a lot of sympathy, actually.
Right.
It's nerve-wracking to meet new people, okay? Because anybody who Googles me they're going to see the allegations like the first or second hit, okay? Thank you to these fucking lousy people. All of the things that I've succeeded at are second to the false allegations that these fucking liars inflicted on me. But a lot of people see it. A lot of people, and when I say, when I say that I was taken down with false allegations, people understand it. The people who believe the allegations. I mean, they're just not my kind of people. They're not skeptics. It hurts, Stephen. I got to tell you, it hurts. Okay. I'm a good guy. I never hurt anybody. I never force anybody. I never do anything. I try very hard not to do bad. I have a guilt shame complex. It's been my driving force since childhood. And it stops me from doing bad things because I really, really can't handle the guilt. So if I had done anything to these people, I'd feel guilty about it. Believe me, I would. And the fact, I mean, look at Rebecca Vitsmun, okay?
Well, yeah, I'd like to just bring that up because, I mean, what's really interesting and pivotal about that whole episode is that it's documented every single stage of the way. It isn't a he said versus she said. The fact of the matter is what she says in her own words is absurd to anyone who's skeptically minded, who's interested in diligence. Might be worth a moment just to explain who Rebecca Vitsmun is, and to just explain the only reason we're using her name is because she's very open and public with her allegations against you.
False accusers deserve no solace. Okay, I have no problem saying Beth Presswood / Rachel Lomelli. Rachel Lomelli is her real name, I believe, and she lives in Houston. And fuck her. Okay, I mean, I have zero pity for these people. Okay,
okay.
I don't care if they never get jobs again, because I can never get a job again. Think about that, Stephen. I'm unemployed right now. I'm self-employed. I can't get a job for the rest of my life because of Rachel Lomelli / Beth Presswood and Rose Sinclair and Matt Dillahunty and Nick Fish. I can never get a job again because anytime anyone Googles me, they're going to see that and they're never going to hire me. So fuck all those people. I do not care. Nuke them. I don't care. I don't want harm to come to them, obviously. But if they lose their jobs because of the shit they've done to me, I'm very, very okay with that. And if they can never get hired again because of the shit they've done to me, I'm very, very okay with that too. And,
yeah. I understand where that mentality comes from, and far be it for me to tell you how to conduct yourself in that regard. I've not been...
Sorry.
It's okay. I've not been what you've been through, obviously.
Obviously. Yeah. I'm so emotional, Stephen. I'm so emotional.
I get it. I understand.
I'm trying to get past this anger. I'm trying to get past this emotional level, and I'm so much better than I used to be.
There'll be no tone policing on this podcast, don't worry.
Okay, good.
In terms of Rebecca Vitsmun, she sort of became a minor celebrity in around about 2013. She was on a live interview with Wolf Blitzer, and I think her home had been devastated by a hurricane or some sort of natural event. And I think he asked her, words to the effect of, you must thank Jesus for making it out of there. And she said, well, actually, I'm an atheist. And that was celebrated as an act of bravery. And I suppose it was in that part of the world at that particular time on live TV, especially, I mean, America's almost a unique in that sense. And she became somewhat of an activist herself. You kind of forged a relationship, a friendship when you moved to Seattle. Tell me what the accusations were, and then I suppose we'll talk about the conclusion of the legal proceedings, if that's okay with you, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. It's just emotionally draining for me, but it's fine because it's an important story to get out, okay? And it's important for people to understand that I'm not exaggerating with this story, and it's important to understand that this is real and that this is sanctioned by a section of the movement right now. That this woman still has lots and lots of friends, including Beth Presswood and Matt Dillahunty. Okay, so Rebecca Vitsmun is this minor celebrity. So I go out down in this big ball of flames, right? And when I went down, I lost everything that I cared about. I lost my job, I lost my career, I lost my reputation, but I also lost my family. Okay, my wife and I are now divorced. My kid and I are estranged, and things are bad for me. And it's April of 19, so it's been a year since it all happened, and I'm sitting alone in my apartment in Seattle, stewing in my juices. And I finally start, just peeking my head out of my room a little bit, and there's Rebecca Vitsmun. She lives right here in Seattle. I remember her. She was at my convention once or twice. She spoke somewhere along the line. She's a minor celebrity. I know her. She calls me. We talk. I go to her house, meet her husband. Her husband, we get along great. We start socializing. We go out to bars together. Her husband lends me 2 computers, nice computers. Okay. Because I was in the shitter. I was in the crapper. I didn't even have a computer. I had an old laptop. So Nathan Finch from Microsoft, whose name I will gladly drop because he's a piece of shit too. Nathan Finch lends me 2 Microsoft computers, and we're getting along fine. And she invites me to go to this party that she's throwing at her friend's house. And I'm like, I'm so injured, right? I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm not going to go to the party. And she says, come on, go to the party. We'll drive you there and we'll pick you up and we'll drop you off. And so this is the first party that I've been to since everything happened. This is the first opportunity that I've had to smile since anything happened. So I went to the party. So Nathan picked me up at the bus stop. And I'm going to go into this a little bit in detail because I want you to understand what happened. Nathan picked me up at the bus stop and drove me to the party. When I got to the party, Rebecca was there. She had a cast on. And she jumps up. She stands up. She sees me coming. She jumps up. She says, I'm not going to stand up for everybody, but I'm going to stand up to hug you, Dave.
Is this a cast on her leg?
With a cast on her leg.
Right, okay.
Okay. So I said, okay, great. So I went over and I hugged her and I said, hi, how are you? We're at a party. We're having a good time. I had a beer. I had 2. I did not have 3. I had a little bit of weed. I did not have a lot. I was on my best behavior. I had a great time at this party. At one time in the party, Rebecca we were going to go out to the backyard and smoke weed because, by the way, it's Washington here. We're allowed to smoke weed. We're going out in the backyard and she is trying to bend over and put on her shoes. And I put my hand on her back and I said, would you like some help? And she said, no, I'm fine. And I said, okay. And I went out back and we smoked weed. And that was the end of the incident. But come to find out, that touch on the back was sexual assault. It touched her nerve. It allegedly touched her nerve that went straight to her vagina and made her so sexually turned on that she called it sexual assault when I touched her on the back. And so Of course, David G. McAfee wrote a big hit piece on it. Hemant Mehta made a big hit piece. Look at me, David Silverman, 3 strikes, 3 sexual assault charges, Dave, 3 sexual assault charges. And the amount of hate came pouring into AAI like unreal. And it was not going to stop.
I mean, it's important just to point out at this point, the way you've summarized it there isn't your summary. These are her words. These are the things she said. This is all on record. We have the court recordings, her social media posts, interviews.
She filed actual charges. Okay, she filed charges because she did the whole thing to help her boost her podcast. Okay, so she did 3 podcast episodes on Dave Silverman touching her.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 podcast episodes on David Silverman touching her, and her witness to me touching her back. She brought me to court. She tried to get a restraining order against me for touching her back because she said she felt threatened. The judge threw it out. She filed assault charges against me. The police threw them out. Did not file the charges. Did not accept the charges. And the witness came on my show about a month ago and apologized and said that it was all about taking me down from a job they decided I didn't deserve.
Okay, so that's interesting to me, and I've heard you. I've seen you post about this. I haven't listened to this conversation between you two, but up until this point, it was sort of my understanding, really, that this was a not particularly well-adjusted individual, fairly troubled, who was making allegations against you. Now, it didn't look on the surface like it was malicious, although I'm pretty fucking sure it felt that way to you. But it just felt like perhaps she genuinely believed what she was saying, which is obviously an issue as well. But now you tend to think this was sort of orchestrated now.
No, she insisted I go to the party. Okay. And she did 3 podcast episodes entitled Dave Silverman Touched Me at a Party. Okay. This was a trap.
Did she tell you she was going to release these conversations or have these conversations before she did?
No, she asked me to come on and talk about it. And I said, no, I don't want to come on and talk about it. I just touched you on the back and it's going to hurt me if I come on and talk about it because people are going to say bad things. And then she started just lying, saying bad things.
Would you say you're a generally tactile individual anyway?
Tactile?
As in you like to touch, you're affectionate physically with people, friends?
Yes, especially with people I know. Remember, I had known her for months and months. This wasn't a stranger at a party. This was a person who stood up and hugged me as soon as I walked in.
So, I mean, do you think in the realms of what's appropriate touching for people you're semi, friendly with, the lower back is appropriate?
Not lower back, back.
Back. So this, I think she turned.
It was a completely appropriate touch.
This is the first time I think I'd heard the word sacrum. Seems to be the word.
Yeah, she changed the name of where I touched her. She changed what I did. First, it was a touch. Then it was a grope. Then it was a grab. Okay, in court it was a grab. It's just lies. And the problem, Steve, is that we as a movement have stopped telling people to shut up, sit down, you're crazy. We as a movement have stopped telling people you're wrong. We as a movement can't tell a woman when she says, oh, he touched me on the back, that's sexual assault. We can't say, shut up, no, it's not anymore. We used to be able to say that. We can't say that anymore. And so our skepticism as a movement is gone. Now we believe all women. Now, 3 strikes, you're out. It doesn't matter. Look at me. I've never assaulted anyone in my life, and I've got 3 accusations against me.
So, that's a great point to bring up, really, because I struggle with this when I come back and forth. So my innate instinct is to say, when it's the case of his word versus her, is, well, all we have really is anecdotal information. It's not enough for me to clear the bar of skepticism. However, does skepticism fail us in the realm of sexual assault, inappropriate sexual behavior? Because it is entirely possible these things could happen without any trace of evidence or any possibility or potential of the aggrieved party to produce any sort of evidence that would corroborate what they say. And I imagine it probably happens more than I'm aware of for women. I'm obviously not going to claim some of the scaremongering statistics that have been debunked on, campus rapes, things like that. But I appreciate that women probably have to deal with a lot more of this than I'm aware of to varying degrees. I fully admit a lot of progress has been made in that realm. I'm just trying to get to how we deal with accusations of this sort whilst showing compassion and empathy whilst maintaining our skeptical integrity.
Well, AAI suspended me with pay and did an investigation. And they were listening and they were doing all the things, and they treated her with respect far more than she deserved. I have nothing but good things to say about what AAI did and how AAI treated me, as opposed to how American Atheists treated me after 20 fucking years. The AAI didn't really, it's a hard place to say, okay? Because yes, women can be assaulted and there's no evidence. On the other hand, they can also fucking lie through their teeth. And they do. And the idea that, women don't lie about sexual assault is so much horseshit. And so what we have, but the same thing goes for men too, okay? Somebody could grope my ass. And you know what I have to do if somebody gropes my ass and I have no evidence? I have to get the fuck over it and move on. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Okay. If somebody gropes my ass 2 or 3 times and they won't stop, then I have a problem. But if somebody touches my ass and then we have to start getting over it. We have to start allowing people to have faux pas. Sure, groping of the ass is a bit of an overstatement, but we have to start granting people. We have, first of all, we have to grow a fucking thicker skin, and because there's no way around it. There's no way around it. We're going to have a situation where it's going to be he said, she said, he said, she said all the time, because we're talking about interpersonal reactions. Nobody's recording their things. Nobody's videotaping. It's going to be interpersonal. It's going to be anecdotal. And there are going to be people who are actual victims of sexual assault. And there are going to be Rebecca Vitsmans and Beth Presswoods and Rachel Lomelli's. And so we have to weigh this concept of due process versus personal liberties. And that there's a level, okay? If there's no evidence, maybe there's no harm. Maybe there's no harm. Okay? Maybe there's no harm. If there's a bruise, maybe there's harm. Maybe you go to the police. If there's groping, if there's evidence, if it's harassment, but if it's small, maybe there's no harm. Okay? And maybe that goes for all sexes. And maybe that's the only way we get out of this, because we can't do the he said, she said forever. We can't. It's not productive. We have to behave well. We have to promote good behavior. We have to promote sex, respect. We have to promote a humanism that's all encompassing, that brings in both the man and the woman, the reporter and the reportee, I should say.
Sure, but I mean, there must be part of that includes reinforcing the idea that you shouldn't really touch people as a general rule, and certainly there are times, I would imagine, when there's an overspill of a certain generation or a culture of people that still think certain things are acceptable when they're not. And I suppose there's a line between engendering this idea that you don't have the right to just take or grab something because you want it, versus reinforcing the idea of being a perpetual victim at the same time. So
right. There's a big difference. There's a big difference between me touching Rebecca on the back and asking if she's okay, and me grabbing her ass because she's bending over because I want to.
Absolutely. So I mean, what's fascinating about this? What's fascinating about this case study, this one with regarding Rebecca, is that it's all there, documented. We can hear her words. We have all the pieces of the puzzle for any rational-minded person to conclude that what she's saying is fucking insane. And I think I'm being very generous there with my description of it. However, there are still people out there who still will side with her on this. I mean, I suppose a good place to start would be the bloggers that you mentioned earlier, the American bloggers that took you to task on this latest allegation. Have they followed up what they've written about you to kind of spell out the conclusion of the legal proceedings?
Absolutely not.
Right.
They have done nothing because hello, Hemant Mehta, you're an unethical piece of shit after all. Because they write these, and David G. McAfee, oh, tribalism is good, honesty is not. They write these hit pieces, Dave Silverman accused for a third time, and that's in Google searches, okay? That's going to be, when I apply for a job in 20 years, they're going to Google search and they're going to see Hemant Mehta and David G. McAfee saying, Dave Silverman accused for a third time. And they're never going to see a rebuttal. They're never going to see, oh, look, he was exonerated. They're never going to see that.
But that's deeply irresponsible. That's unethical.
It's borderline. It's borderline fucked up. It's really fucked up when you think about it, especially since Hemant and I have known each other for a decade or more, maybe even more than a decade. And he's just hanging me out to dry because tribalism. Tribalism.
So what's the tribal angle there with Hemant?
It's woke.
Right.
It's woke. Believe all women. Women never lie about sexual assault. They can't say women lie about sexual assault, even when they fucking lie about sexual assault. They can't. And it was what you were saying before, Stephen. I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but
no,
I do
go ahead.
This.
You're the guest.
But there's no redemption. It's like what you were saying before. Once you're out forever. It doesn't matter if you're proven innocent. It doesn't matter because woke culture is a different kind of rage, right? Woke culture is rage on behalf of other people. Okay, I have rage on behalf of myself. Okay, you could be angry in my place because Beth Presswood lied. Rebecca Vitsmun lied. But if I come to terms with it, right? If I find peace someday, if I get along with Rachel O'Malley in some future time, right? You're going to be okay with it because I am okay with it. But wokeism isn't about that. Wokeism is about rage on behalf of other people. I am a racist or a bigot or whatever, and that means I'm bad about other people. And so you're mad at me for being bad against these other people. Well, when you do that, you can do that, but you can get mad on behalf of other people, but you can't forgive on behalf of other people. Okay? You can't say, oh, David's been exonerated because your rage is on behalf of other people, other unnamed people, other women who are victims. And so when you say, oh, Dave's been exonerated, you're actually attacking the idea that those women can't lie. So you've got this rage on behalf of other people that cannot be eliminated. You can't.
Okay.
Because you can't forgive somebody for somebody else.
All right. So I think the best thing just to move forward in the conversation would be draw a line under the accusations, because I appreciate you've done this conversation to death on various formats, and I try my best to understand the emotional toll it's had on you as an individual as well. So it might be worth just focusing a little bit on this woke ideology and your sort of journey from president of the American Atheists to someone who's now vocally anti-woke. And some might have some cynicism towards that shift, either that maybe it's because you're a product of the accusations that have been leveled at you. They obviously will be an effect on your psyche and movement in your ideology because of that. And also some would point to the fact that you yourself seemed at some points to be dipping your toe in the waters of woke ideology and enforcing it in a little bit, in the sense that I think you came down very heavily and critically on one of the MythCon events beforehand, when they were getting a lot of finger pointed at them for being, alt-right, far-right, Nazi, fascist, whatever was labelled at them. And I can attest firsthand that absolutely none of that is true whatsoever. And I think you've had conversations with them since. So, I mean, what can you say to people who might just think cynically that Dave's been ousted from one area of discourse and he's now just trying to find his way back into another one?
Well, part of that's really true, right? I mean, I was woke. I was woke. I was a part. I hit MythCon real hard. I also was part of the reason that Johnny Depp was uninvited from the Reason Rally 2.
Oh, and this because of all the Amber Heard accusations as well. Right.
Yeah, okay. I believed the woman. The woman. I had no idea that she was the abuser. Okay, I had no idea that he was the victim and she was the abuser. I just went with it. So critics of me who would say, oh, wow, he was so deep in it and now he's rebelling against it because it bit him in the ass. They're correct. Okay, they're absolutely correct. It took I mean, I always knew that there was something wrong. I was always, and I'm very proud to say, I was always a supporter of the ex-Muslims, which is anti-woke. But
Yes, I can always credit you for being a vocal opponent of Islam and especially fundamentalist Islam. That's always been
yeah,
something
yeah.
you've had.
And wokeists like brown people, and brown people, as of course all Muslims are brown people if you ask them. So this is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
racial thing.
yeah.
But wokeism doesn't like anti-woke, and I've always been pro anti-woke. I'm sorry, wokeism doesn't like ex-Muslim,
Yeah.
and I've always been pro ex-Muslim. But I was woke. I was in it, and it took me getting bitch slapped. I mean, it took my spine being removed, which is what I feel has happened, to shake me out of that. And that's, I kind of feel like a person who's been freed from religion. Okay, I kind of feel like, because I never went through a conversion. I was always an atheist, but now I feel like I've kind of been through a bit of a conversion, because there is so much falsehood on the left. And I'm not okay with it. Okay. I'm there's just so many lies on the left. I was so used to, Fox News being a lie, Fox News being a lie. MSNBC lies a lot. CNN lies a lot. And people don't understand that. And, one of the things that I'm trying to do now, well, we're all trying to make our way through this life. Okay. Certainly when I was woke, I was wrong. And I'm trying to help people not be wrong anymore. Because I mean, so yeah, the analogy works, saying that wokeism is a religion and I'm a convert from it. And I want to help people leave it. I want to help people see the truth, because I think wokeism is a real danger. I don't just think it's bad. I think it's a real danger, because it distracts from the real problems. It takes from the real problems. And it makes things worse. I mean, to assume that racism is everywhere, and to assume that the problems in our society are due to racism when they are not, gives us a place to cure a problem that doesn't exist and leave a problem that does exist unchecked. And I see wokeism as at this point, I'm seeing it as a real danger to society. Stephen, when you and I were in that convention in London, mm-hmm. I sat down with a preacher who I knew, and I don't want to mention his name, but he's a high-end preacher. When I say high-end, I mean he's a guy who's like one of the higher ups in the Southern Baptist Convention. And when I was debating people like Dinesh D'Souza and James White, he was one of the big bad guys. He was one of the big bad guys in there. And he was at this convention where you and I were. And I sat down with him and I talked to him and I hugged him and I cried a little bit with him, because we are not in the situation anymore where we have the luxury to debate whether or not God exists. Neither of us are in the situation where, and we both hope someday that we can, throw all this woke shit aside and get back to the luxury of debating who's right.
Feels almost quaint, the God debate now, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Isn't that cute? They want to debate God. We're talking about freedom of speech. We're talking about due process. We're talking about relative facts. We're talking about racist science.
Yeah.
We're talking about eliminating AP classes if they're not racially diverse enough. We're talking about so many solutions to non-problems that are going to make this world a worse place, that are making this world a worse place. And, we don't have time to worry about that soft stuff anymore, that quaint stuff, as you mentioned.
So I very much doubt you and I would disagree on the problem of wokeness. It's very real. It's very serious. It's further embedded in institutions than most people care to admit, I feel. I tend to worry because you're someone who is a radical activist. What you were doing with American Atheists and at the time and place you were doing it was radical and brave at that point in time in America, challenging the state essentially and their relationship with Christianity specifically. You have this radical mindset, and I think you mentioned it at the start of the podcast, you're not afraid of using rhetoric that's a little bit on the edge, a little bit close to the line. And I often wonder is this something that you may take in the other direction now? You're focusing your ire on this woke ideology, and for some reason, fair or not, it's become thought of as a right-wing pursuit because we're specifically attacking the left. It appears to be the left's issue here. I'm personally a left-wing liberal who's anti-woke. I don't know where you fall on the political scale. Maybe we can get to that. And I just worry and wonder if your journey to this side of the political spectrum might get to a sort of... what was the word I used? Radical end, because I heard you speaking on a podcast not so long ago, and they were discussing the death of George Floyd, and I think everyone was in agreement that was an injustice. But I think you referred to him as a piece of human garbage at one point. And I'm not sure if you still feel the same about them comments. Maybe you can put them into context for us. But at the time, it felt rather unnecessarily callous. Even if you do believe that to be true, even if it is true, perhaps it just feels rather unnecessary or not particularly useful to say if you want to get your point across. I mean, it certainly doesn't tie up with a sort of humanistic worldview to me to call him, a man that's died unfairly, a piece of human garbage. Maybe you can just put those words into context for us and tell us what you meant.
So sure. So I went a little too far calling George Floyd human garbage, but my point stands. Okay, George Floyd. You can say anything about him, but you can't say that he was the kind of guy that you would invite to dinner. Okay. He was a 5-time felon. He was committing another felony. He was high as fuck on meth. People called the cops on him because he was walking around high as fuck on meth. Jacob Blake was human garbage. Okay. And he was arrested 30 times before Kamala Harris went to go see him. 30 times. Okay. And so when I was making these statements, I'm making these statements because I think it's important for us to realize that felons matter less than the rest of us. Okay. And they should. I think when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, a lot of times what we're talking about is Black criminals, Black felons committing yet another felony. And my point saying that was I care a lot less about felons, no matter what color they are, obviously, committing yet another felony than I do for the people who are just driving in their car or putting their kids in their cribs. And that when we talk about Black Lives Matter and we talk about felons getting killed by cops in the act of committing yet another felony versus the black on black violence, which affects 30 times more people. And most of them are innocent.
Okay. But so just to pick up on a quick point, I'll definitely agree with you in terms of the claims and goals of BLM and the complete disregard and almost ignorance towards black on black violence and the devastation that caused.
Willful ignorance.
Yeah, willful ignorance. That's the phrase I was reaching for. Also, I will appreciate as well that a lot of the black deaths at the hands of police have been completely misrepresented a lot of the time. But it feels like to me with George Floyd, we have a clear-cut example of somebody, albeit a criminal background, but at that point in time, he wasn't a threat to the officers, as far as I could tell. They should have really taken him in alive. He deserved due process. The police have to deal in a humane way, regardless of who they're dealing with. And it just feels like you've lost sight of that a tad when you
I don't think I have, though, Stephen, because these cops are making life and death decisions many, many times a day.
Sure. And
many, many times a day when they arrest somebody, they put their hands behind the back. I would say 100% of the times the convict says, "Oh, you're hurting me." 100% of the time. Okay. They opened the door for George Floyd. And he says, "I can't breathe." Before he said anything, he says, "I can't breathe." The man was high as fuck. The man was dangerous and strong. I am not a cop. Okay. But one thing I can say from the video that I saw is that it wasn't racially motivated.
Okay, that's a different issue. I mean, that's a very inconvenient truth for the activist and cities burning and things we've seen. Is that for all we know, we can't really claim or corroborate that race had anything to do with that. But I suppose that's a second
it's just
issue.
Assumed, and so people were rioting for this 5-time felon who probably died of meth.
Possibly. So I will happily, or willingly, should I say, put aside the racial component, because I don't think that's been established. I'll wait to see if they come up with something I'm unaware of. But I think it's the knee on the neck for 7 minutes most people are horrified by. And I feel like we should be horrified about that, whether it's a black man, a white man, whether he's resisting arrest or not. It just feels like that is a level of excessiveness that is unjustifiable in any context.
Maybe, but I'm not a cop. Okay. And these guys do it all the time. And there were 4 of them there, and he was high on meth, and a knee on the neck for somebody who's been saying, I can't breathe since before you put him on the ground. I am not willing to say that these folks did anything wrong. I'm not a cop. Okay. If you don't like it, then change the cop policy. But I mean,
aren't they facing murder charges?
It's not murder. That wasn't murder. Okay. It wasn't murder. Okay, somebody died while being apprehended by cops while high as fuck on meth. I don't care. He was 5 times arrested. He was counterfeiting. I don't care. I care about the little girl in the car who was driving through the Wendy's parking lot who was shot by the fucking people protesting for Black Lives Matter from this guy.
But I think people might notice you've spent the first half of this podcast talking about due process and the possibility of redemption, but you don't care that a man's died in police custody unnecessary. I mean, it seems...
I do care about due process, okay? I care about due process. Everybody who gets arrested should get due process, and everybody who goes through the penal system comes out clean in my eyes, okay? If you commit a felony, you come out, you're not a felon anymore, okay? As far as I'm concerned, felons can be reformed, wonderful people, great. But while you're in the act of committing yet another felony, I don't care. I don't care, and nobody should. Okay? If you're in the act of committing yet another felony, nobody is forcing you. It's not white oppression. It's not systemic racism. It's you committing yet another felony. And if you get killed committing yet another felony, black, white, Latino, or Asian, or Jewish, I don't care. I don't. You shouldn't commit a felony. Stop committing felonies and you won't get shot by cops.
I feel like we're so close on this issue yet miles apart at the same time. So I'm gonna try and come in a different way here. So I think I share your opinion of George Floyd, the man. I'm not going to treat him as a martyr. I was annoyed to see in my home city of Manchester, actually, a mural with his image was erected on the wall, as if he's somebody to celebrate, which I completely oppose. And I will happily talk about his past indiscretions, his crimes, things he's done. I probably wouldn't like the guy, and I probably wouldn't like him around anyone I love. That's a given. However, I tend to feel none of that matters the moment you're in police custody and you're not a direct threat to life. And that's what seemed to be the situation when they had this man. They had him on the ground, several officers on top of him. He's saying he can't breathe. One of them puts the knee on his neck. To me, that seems like, I think the nicest possible thing you could say about that is bad policing. And there should have been a moment there, or at least a possibility of this man being taken in alive. It seemed like it was their carelessness and their actions that prevented that from happening, rather than George Floyd.
It did. And
I care about that. I feel like if you want a just system and an effective police force, they have to do better than that in them situations. And I completely grant how difficult police is. I always tend to side on the side of police. I know it's a life or death situation every time they have a confrontation with a violent perpetrator. A lot of times I've noticed that police shootings seem just when others will argue they're not. But in this particular case, it feels very clear cut to me.
I mean, I saw the video and it does seem one-sided. I'm not doubting that. And I'm not saying it was great police work either.
Right.
Okay. I'm not saying it was great police work. I'm not saying there should be no penalties. I'm not saying there should be no prosecution. I'm not saying that things shouldn't be reviewed. I'm not saying that George Floyd deserved to die. Please don't say I said that.
Okay, that's good. I thought that's where I thought you was going. I thought it felt a bit of a like he deserves what he gets kind of attitude.
No, I say felons deserve what they get while they're committing crimes. Okay. And I say that if you commit a crime and you're in the middle of a crime and you get shot by a cop, I'm not shedding a tear, not one. Okay. If you're committing, I mean, it's a difference. If you're starving and you steal a loaf of bread to feed your starving family, I'm all about the empathy. But if you're committing your 5th or 30th felony and you get shot and killed, I don't care. The world is better off without you. That's a hard thing to say, but it's true. For if you're an ex-felon, the world is not better off without you because you've reformed. You're not a member of the bad guys anymore. But if you are, I mean, I'm not falling all over. I'm not crying. I'm not shedding a tear. I'm not standing up and saying, "Oh no, we," because being a cop is hard, Stephen, and I don't know a damn thing about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of armchair policing going on social media for sure.
And I don't know what the policies are. I don't know what the procedures are, and I don't know what it feels like to have my life on the line every day, and to get a call to say, "Hey, Dave, there's a guy with a gun. Go fix it." Okay, that's a fucking scary thing to say, and these people get that all the time. And I mean,
hey, if you think the discussion on this is bad in America, you want to try speaking to someone in the UK about it, because at least in American culture, you understand what a firearm is and how dangerous they are, and how 1 second too late is too late.
Yes.
In the UK, there's this sort of mindset that the police should be almost wait to be fired upon before they can return fire, which is it's a complete inability to understand the escalation of violence with lethal weapons thrown into the mix,
really
which is a unique situation from America. So I would never.
Cops are good people, okay? Cops are good people. They're trying to do good work, okay? And we need to defend them a fuck lot more than we defend our felons.
I agree. And that might bring me to my next item of discussion, because I tend to feel a sense of disappointment with the way American secular, atheist and humanistic organizations have gone. It feels at the moment like it's just the American organizations, present company accepted, of course. The UK organizations that I'm friendly with don't appear to have succumbed to the woke virus yet, but I think it's probably in the post. Unfortunately, it seems to get everything in the end. But in terms of the sort of American humanist organization, a while back, I saw them spreading articles and information, openly encouraging their members not to be friendly with the police at pride marches and things like that. I've seen American Atheists openly throw people like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris under the bus after the Christchurch massacre in New Zealand, when a white supremacist killed worshippers at a mosque, a horrible act of terrorism. But they seem to share articles from the Huffington Post and imply that this was the logical conclusion of the anti-Islamic rhetoric of Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, which is absolutely unforgivable in my mind. At a time when the answer to a terrorist attack in the name of a warped ideology is to just keep attacking warped ideologies, they sort of bent the knee to the woke mob and almost provided cover for Islam, which is completely wrong-headed. So maybe as somebody who was an insider and knows more about that organization than many, what's gone wrong with the organization to the point where they're shying away from criticizing Islam at a time when Islamic fundamentalism is on the rise globally?
Well, this is another thing where I'm going to get emotional, because I was involved in this movement for 20 odd years. I started in 1996. So that's 24 years now, almost 25. And to watch these people just give up, on logic, on due process, on our fight. They just give up on the fight. Nick Fish is super woke, but so is Roy Speckart, so is Robin Blumner, so is whoever's in charge of SSA now. I mean, these organizations are no longer atheist organizations. They're woke organizations made up of atheists. If you try to go to an atheist convention or an atheist event, and just as a conservative or as a centrist, you'll be booed out. You'll be harassed out. These organizations have lost everything. I've looked at, I mean, I've obviously got a lot of emotional baggage around American Atheists. So I'll just stay away from them, because It's just so obvious. But when you look at, CFI, when I was working for the Conwu Foundation, we sent CFI a $25,000 check just because I wanted to support CFI and Richard Dawkins. They sent it back. And there was a lot more money coming. They sent back a $25,000 check. Robin Blumner did this because it came in part from me. Right. Okay. And Dawkins knew about it, did nothing to it. And there was going to be a lot more money. So that's really, really woke. It's also very evident that they don't need money. Secular Student Alliance, Foundation Beyond Belief, same thing. I was going to get Noelle a nice big fat donation from the Conwu Foundation. She blocked me because it was me. This is ridiculous. This is not an atheist organization, an atheist movement anymore. This is a woke movement that turns away people, including, 2 decades allies, because believe all women. And so when I look at this, and so I need to say very, very clearly, there's a second generation of atheist organizations. Okay. Atheist Alliance International, which is not really a second generation, but it's kind of been reborn. Atheist Alliance International, Atheist Republic, and Atheists for Liberty. I'm on the advisory board of Atheists for Liberty. These are non-woke atheist organizations trying to stick with the program. But when I look at, AHA is such a huge freaking disappointment. Even the ACLU, they're anti-due process now. Okay. And again, it's all because tribalism. It's all because you can't tell people, just sit down and shut up. You're wrong.
So let's talk about Atheists for Liberty. Have you still got a bit of time? I appreciate we've just come to the hour.
Yeah, I can talk about them.
Great stuff. So, I noticed the other day there was some pictures spread around the internet and articles about you guys, Atheists for Liberty, and I happen to know a few of the members that, or have met them in person, who are working for Atheists for Liberty, and you guys were at ostensibly it was a pro-Trump event or a conservative event, however you want to term it, and the outreach was there, I suppose, with the mindset that these people aren't typically atheist friendly. These people are on the other side of the political divide quite often because of the way the other organizations operate. Let's reach out to them. Let's see what we've got in common. Let's see if we can come to any sort of understanding, etc. Now that to me seems incredibly sensible and valuable, especially in the current climate and the political divides we've had. But a lot of the aforementioned atheist bloggers really went to town in mocking this attempt to break bread with the quote unquote enemy. I think they were termed conspiracy theorists, Trumpers, etc. So tell me about that event. What was the goal there, and how did you find interacting with these people who were pro-Trump?
Well, first I have to say that conservatives are not the enemy. They're Americans. Okay. They're not the enemy. The enemy is China. The enemy is Russia. The enemy is Islam. The enemy is religion. The enemy is not Americans, conservative Americans. They're actually, for the most part, really nice people. I started when I was president of American Atheists. I took American Atheists to CPAC, which is the largest conservative convention, made a lot of members, made a lot of inroads. And now the founder and president of Atheists for Liberty, Thomas Sheedy, is kind of taking that baton and going off and doing it more. So they've been to CPAC and they've been to the Turning Point event where we were. And I think the bloggers who take me to task are blind and foolish. I think that it should be a bellwether for people who listen to or watch these bloggers. For anybody who says, "Oh, Dave is bad because he's talking to the enemy and trying to make friends," those people are not activists. They have no idea what the fuck they're talking about, and I don't care. That's one of the things that we really do need to do. We need to stop caring about what the woke left says about us, because whatever they think is going to be bad. Whatever we do is going to be bad.
So, yeah, I mean, I will totally be on the same page here in terms of it doesn't even cross my mind to consider conservatives or Trump voters to be the enemy by default. I'll
Right.
engage with anyone and talk to anyone. But is there not an uncomfortable aspect of this also that you do tend to find, and this is true of the far left as well, but you do and can find a lot of really toxic ideologies and, unreasonable behavior on the side of really passionate pro-Trump zealots, people who are really steeped in American nationalism. And I often feel that sometimes, me especially being British, living where I do, I don't live next door to some of these people, the most toxic brand of people that pro-Trump has to offer. Are we in danger in our attempts to cross the political divide and have open discussions? Or are we in danger of sometimes forgetting that people who are angry at Trump supporters might have a legitimate reason to feel that way?
No, because you're going to get those people, right? Those people are there. Okay. When I was there, there's a couple of different camps in republicanism, in conservatism, and I was there. Turning Point is kind of like the right of center, but not crazy group, and then there's the Nick Fuentes group that's crazy right, that's alt right, and they hate each other. Okay, so when I was there at Turning Point, the Fuentes group was shouting tweets at me about being a Jew, and all these, and so there's a whole lot of anti-Semitism on the far right. You can't miss it. I mean, it's just pouring out. I did not see any racism other than the anti-Semitism. When I was at CPAC, when I was at SAS, I met a couple of very religious people, and we experienced, I'm just going to say, no toxicity at all. I got some people saying, "Oh, you need Jesus." I got some people saying, "Well, I completely disagree." And I got some people saying, "I don't agree that." Did we get anybody? I don't think anybody actually said we shouldn't be there, except the Groypers, except the Fuentes group. We were pretty much welcomed. There was, and every time, and because Charlie Kirk is super religious. Turning Point is not a religious organization, but it's run by a guy named Charlie Kirk who's super religious. So there was a lot of religion at this event, right? A lot of Jesus, a lot of God. And every time somebody went out stage and started talking about God, we got more atheists coming to our booth because they get pissed off about it.
Right.
Because Turning Point to kids, it's for young, it's for millennials. Okay. Millennials, like 50%, 60% like atheist. So these conservatives are there, and they're, the guy gets up and says, responsibility, everybody cheers, and personal responsibility and personal stuff and all this great stuff. Everybody cheers. And they say, God is with us. And they go, yay. Okay. and so the idea of going to these events is absolutely solid. It's absolutely grounded in data. It's absolutely evidence-based good. And it's also evidence that the people who are yelling at it, who's screaming at it, don't know what they're talking about and should not be regarded. I mean, they just shouldn't. It's blind. We signed up a few dozen members to Atheists for Liberty at SAS. Okay. I'll say that again, a few dozen paid memberships at the Atheists for Liberty booth at the SAS convention.
Yeah. And there's an argument here. I mean, people at these events might be trying to find their way, just scoping out, where their tribe is. Because we all do it to a certain extent. We all try and find our particular political tribe in that way. And there are people who are on the fence at these events who may be swayed by a conversation with yourself and your colleagues, etc. And that's what you want. Anyway, you can spread a little bit more, skepticism or atheism's a good thing in my book, for sure. So I suppose, does the issue really come down to a certain side on the political debate being unwilling to have open conversations? Because I tend to find more often than not that the people who are conservatives, right of centre, centrist, are always willing to talk. They'll always turn up for a debate or a conversation. Yeah, and the people on the left really shirk their responsibility. I mean, just speaking to some of the guys at the conferences I've spoke at, they always try their hardest to get somebody on the far left, the woke left, to speak at the event. They roll out the red carpet. They put hundreds of man hours in trying to get someone to confirm their attendance, and they always struggle. Whereas people in the centre, right of centre, conservative scale, be happy to turn up and defend their ideas. Is it a case of the left now have just thrown in the towel in terms of defending their ideas? Has it become a dogma for them?
Well, it is. And the problem is, when we talk about religion, we were talking about wokeism. We're talking about a religion. We're talking about people who will not, who claim to have the data, but don't. Okay. They claim to be on the side of science, but aren't. And deep down, they know it. Deep down, they know that the Black Lives Matter narrative has no data to back its shit up. Okay. Deep down, they know that white fragility is a piece of shit book.
Yes.
And they have no data. Okay. And so that's why they won't debate. Okay. That's why when they do debate, their debates are all about changing the subject. And, you can't see it because you're white. I'm not going to even listen to you because you are a white guy. Therefore, you know nothing about racism and cannot tell me anything about racism. Only a black person can talk about racism. And when a black person talks about racism, they're 100% right 100% of the time. It's not logic, right? It's not real. It's not normal. That's not the way people talk. That's not the way skeptics talk, but that's the way the woke left talk. And they know that that's not tenable. They know that that's not a thing. They know that that data beats emotion. But they don't want their emotions beat. So they run away. That's why woke ideology is cowardice. Because we have a participation trophy problem. Okay. We have spent an entire generation telling everybody that they're winners. Okay. You're a winner too. And you're not wrong. And you're not a loser. And you're not vapid. Everything you say is true e-poo. And so now these people are grown up. And we can't tell them to sit down and shut up and listen. We can't tell them that their lived experience is actually just not true. We can't tell them that their numbers don't match, therefore they're wrong. And so now you've got this postmodernism coming in. Numbers are relative. Numbers are racist. Math is racist. So if your math is wrong, that's just racist math. And your math can be right because participation trophies are true and you're a champion. And so that's what the woke left is. It's all about, I am convinced, it's all about participation trophies. I'm reading right now, long overdue, The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt.
Great book.
Jonathan Haidt, great book, right? Yeah. And they talk about how the helicopter parents, how have created this. And, I think it's that. I think it's about participation trophies. I think it's about the fact that we didn't let our kids lose.
It's very interesting that, going back to the Coddling of the American Mind book and the helicopter parenting, there's some data in there about the peanut allergy and how that's expanding beyond, any conceivable reach in comparable terms of, previous generations, because parents are so reluctant to let their children try nuts from a young age. Now they're developing a peanut allergy. And I suppose it goes back to one of the unironically most racist concepts I've heard of late, is that science is somehow the domain of the Western white man, which I think is an incredibly racist proposition to hold.
Don't you know that E equals MC squared only if you're white? If you're black, because Einstein was white, so that's racist math. Force equals math times acceleration if you're white.
Yeah, show me your working out in black. That's absurd, isn't it?
It is, and it's ridiculous, and it's participation trophies. Okay, because we can't say, all those scientists were white because they were just in the right place at the right time. Now we have to say those scientists were white, but those black scientists are just as good as those white scientists, even though they didn't do what those white scientists did. And so it's racist because black people didn't figure out E equals MC squared. Einstein did. So it's racist. And it is asinine to have this mentality in science. It's asinine to have this mentality anywhere, but it's all about not being able to tell people. I don't want to say black people. I want to say people, because frankly, this is all about whites, right? This Black Lives Matter isn't about black people. It's about white guilt. promoting Black Lives Matter, okay? And it's about fake white guilt, bullshit white guilt, undeserved white guilt. And so we have this mentality, this poisonous thing where we can't, where we're just finding racism everywhere because we're looking for it. And we're looking for it because we want to, I don't know, disrupt the system or some bullshit like that to fix the problem. But this is where I get upset, because we're not fixing a problem. This is where I get upset, because we're solving problems with participation trophies. Oh, Black people aren't succeeding because of racism. No, Black people aren't succeeding because of a bunch of other things that has nothing to do with racism. And we can show that. And if we try and fix the racism, we're not going to fix Black on Black violence, which is 0% racism. We're not going to fix Black suicide, which is 0% racism. It's 0% white oppression. We're going to go down to 1/30th of that level, where it's mostly felons, and we're going to complain about racism there and fix and defund the police. We're going to defund the police. And so this is the problem, okay? We're defunding the police because we can't tell Black people, no, you're committing a lot of crimes. You should stop committing a lot of crimes. Then you won't be arrested so much. We can't say that to Black people because they can't handle it. Or because we white people expect the Black people to not be able to handle it because of that white guilt. And so we say, oh, no. You're victims and the cops are bad. And that's why you're not succeeding, because you're victims and the cops are bad. And there's this systemic racism, which is holding people back. But we can't show anywhere where it is. We can't see it. We can't have any evidence for it. We can just look at the results, and we assume the results are 100% the cause of racism, because participation trophies means there's no personal responsibility.
Yeah, I suppose Black crime rates and the potential for systemic racism is another 4-hour conversation we could get into, and we should at some point perhaps, but Dave,
absolutely,
this has flown by. I want to thank you for coming on. You spoke so candidly about things that I appreciate, are very personal to you, very emotionally charged, but you've put your thoughts across really clearly. Is there anything you'd like to say before I let you get back to what's left of your afternoon now?
Stephen, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on. It's good to see you again.
You too.
And I appreciate that we had a little scheduling snafu. Totally my fault last week. I missed the appointment, and I apologize. And I appreciate you having me back on. My website is firebrandforgood.com. Firebrand for Good is the name that I'm using right now. So if you go to firebrandforgood.com, you can see all that evidence that I was talking about. You can hear the Matt Dillahunty recordings when he's saying, oh, everything's great between you and me 2 years after I allegedly assaulted his wife. It's all on Firebrand for Good. I have a channel, a YouTube channel. It's also YouTube// Firebrand for Good. I talk about this kind of stuff. It's a fledgling channel, but I'm going to be building it up. And on my last note, I would like to wish everybody happy holidays. Atheists for Liberty and Atheist Alliance International and Atheist Republic are all nonprofit organizations. They're great to donate to. I have a tremendous respect for everybody at those organizations, and a special shout out to Thomas Sheedy at Atheists for Liberty. We just tabled at SAS. It was a great idea. It was a great event. Please support these organizations. And Stephen, thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun. And I'm sorry if I got too emotional at times. I do that, especially around what happened to me. I'm getting better. I'm improving.
Emotion, you won't like him when he's angry. Yeah, emotion's always good, Dave. Appreciate. Thank you again for coming on and being so open about everything. And just to reiterate as well, the link that you've directed people towards, just to go and view that, and it reintroduce a little skepticism to the things you've heard or you've read, and just try and come to an objective conclusion rather than reading headlines or taking one source. And I think it'll be quite eye-opening to see what sort of situation we're in with the allegations of these sorts. So yeah, I'll be sure to put a link to that in the show notes as well, Dave.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Good to see you again, and I'll see you next time.
You too. Thank you very much. Take care.
Take care.